Everyone in the courtroom was smiling, because standing in front of them was an old woman. But none of them knew that this woman once decided the fate of people just like them. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I am 69 years old, and today, in a packed New York courtroom, I was reduced to a single word. The word came from my stepdaughter, Vanessa Brooks, spoken casually, almost with amusement. Her laughter echoed louder than it should have. People turned to look at me, some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with quiet pity. 6 months ago, my husband, Richard Brooks, passed away. We were married for 25 years. When he died, he left everything to me: his company, his properties, his investments, the life we built together piece by piece. Vanessa refused to accept that. She sued me. She claimed I manipulated her father, that I isolated him, that I took advantage of an aging man and convinced him to rewrite his will. She hired one of the most expensive lawyers in the city. I stood alone at the defense table. No attorney, no legal team, just a woman in a simple gray coat, holding her purse tightly to keep her hands from shaking. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old arguments, a place where truth is supposed to matter, but appearances often matter more. Across from me sat Vanessa, perfect posture, designer clothes, the confidence of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Beside her stood her lawyer, Daniel Wright. His reputation came before him: brilliant, ruthless, unbeatable. When the judge entered, the room stood. Daniel Wright began his opening statement calmly. "Your Honor," he said, "this is a clear case of undue influence. A woman with no career, no independent income, and no professional identity inserting herself into the life of a wealthy widower." Then Vanessa leaned forward and said it again. She was just a housewife. Something shifted at that moment, because Daniel Wright suddenly stopped speaking. His face turned pale. The pen slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. He stared at me. Not glanced, not judged. He recognized me. "No," he whispered. "This can't be." Vanessa frowned. The judge asked, "Mr. Wright, is there a problem?" His voice shook. "Your Honor, I believe I know this woman." The morning this all started was quiet, too quiet. Since Richard's death, silence had become my routine. I made coffee in the mug he gave me on our 20th anniversary. I sat alone at the kitchen table where we had shared decades of ordinary mornings. Then the doorbell rang. A young man in a cheap suit handed me an envelope. "Legal documents, ma'am." Vanessa was contesting the will. The words were cold and clinical: manipulation, exploitation, undue influence. I wasn't angry. I was stunned. I remembered the nights I slept beside Richard's hospital bed, the medications I learned to manage, the meals I cooked when he could barely stand. I remembered calling Vanessa again and again. She was always busy. Later never came. By the time I finished reading the papers, my hands stopped shaking, not because I felt strong, but because something inside me went very still. If she wanted a fight, she would have one. Not out of revenge, but because I would not let the last chapter of my life be written as a lie. Walking into the courthouse felt like walking into someone else's story. Vanessa sat confidently beside Daniel Wright. I sat alone. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Brooks, do you have legal representation?" "No, Your Honor, I am representing myself." A few people quietly laughed. Daniel Wright smiled politely. He listed facts without context: that I didn't work, that I handled Richard's medications, that I accompanied him to appointments. Care, he implied, was control. When it was my turn, I stood. "I loved my husband," I said simply. "I took care of him because I chose to." Daniel smiled faintly. "Love is not on trial, Mrs. Brooks. Influence is." Court adjourned for the day. That night, I went into Richard's study. I found a key hidden in his desk. Inside a locked drawer was a folder, labeled in his handwriting, "In case you forget." Inside were documents: a law degree, judicial appointment certificates, a photograph of a younger woman in a black robe, me. At the bottom, a note from Richard: You did not become smaller when you chose love. You chose something braver. If anyone forgets who you are, this will remind them. The next morning, I wore the same coat, because I wanted them to underestimate me again. The judge asked, "What is your full legal name before marriage?" I answered, "Eleanor Margaret Hayes." The courtroom went silent. The judge froze. "Justice Eleanor Hayes?" "Yes, Your Honor." Daniel Wright stood up in shock. "I argued my first Supreme Court appeal in front of you." Vanessa's confidence